Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Green for the Whiny Palooza podcast, and I am very excited today because I get to talk to the lovely Erica Bonham. Erica, thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Just, truly honored and excited. Yeah, do
You
it.
guys are going to love her and all things Erica. I just was reading all about her, and she is fabulous. She's a licensed professional counselor, certified EMDR clinician and trainer, and ketamine-assisted psychotherapist who specializes in serving the LGBTQ community, abuse recovery, and trauma related to social and racial injustice. Her best-selling book, Always Enough, Never Done, guides readers through healing their nervous system and transforming wounds into wisdom. As a nationally sought after speaker and course creator, Erica is passionate about helping people recognize their inherent worthiness while acknowledging the personal growth work ahead of them. So now you know why Erica is so fabulous. And I have to start with, I love the title. Can you tell us what inspired you to write Always Enough, Never Done?
Yeah. So I actually created an online course first because I wanted to kind of democratize therapy, right? I found
Mhm.
myself saying a lot of the same things, doing a lot of the same psychoeducation, but also just wanting to offer those more somatic exercises that I found to be really helpful, and just sort of get it all down on paper in book form. So once I did the course, the book just sort of, naturally wanted to come through me. I originally wrote, so the reason it's volume one is because I ended up putting it all together at the end, and I had written like a 600-page book, and nobody
Oh,
wants to
wow.
read a 600-page book about trauma. We have to leave
Oh
that
my gosh.
to, you know the fiction fantasy writers. People will read a 600-page book about, romantic
Dragons.
endeavors, but probably it's a little too much for trauma. So the
Right,
second
right.
volume is really about our collective trauma, relationships, boundary setting, things like that. So I'm hoping to get that out in the world either later this year or early next year. But this book is really about our individual work, our individual nervous systems. And the reason I wanted to keep it in one book is because those aren't mutually exclusive, right? I think of those
Mm.
things as an infinity sign. We have to work on ourselves. We do have to become our own loving sources. And we don't exist in a vacuum, right? We exist within the context of relationship and community. And our individual healing impacts how we show up in relationships and in our communities, and obviously our relationships in our communities impact our individual work and health and all of that. So yeah, it was just this way of it, all this stuff, wanted to come through me, and I hope there's wisdom. I hope there's wisdom there
Oh my
for
gosh, I
folks.
have no doubt. I will tell you that from listening to you for a few minutes, my nervous system is already calming down.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I'm not really worried about AI taking over my job, because AI
No,
will never have that
no.
attuned nervous system to offer, right? It could say the right words, but it's never going to have that attuned human heart and that attuned human nervous system that we
Oh,
all need. We
yes,
all
yes, we all need that. And I'm going to tell you from the title, I want to just start with the title because it says that we're always enough and we're never done. Okay, so I need to know more about the title because as a mom, we feel never done and we don't feel enough. So, can you
100.
help us understand that?
So I think the longer title, and I would invite you and your listeners to just notice what happens in your body when I say these words, because this will be the
Yes.
full title, is you are always and already enough, lovable, worthy, and inextricably connected to every other living thing on this planet. Full stop. So just notice that part of it, right? And just notice what happens in your system, and and we all have shadow. We all have work to do. We all have wounds that likely are, unaddressed. And even if
Mm,
we've walked a fairly, okay life in our individual life, we're just learning about ancestral trauma and historical trauma. And so we're all walking around with some unhealed stuff. And when we think that we are quote unquote done with healing, done with growing, done with our work, that really is the moment that we cause harm.
mm,
And I'm so aware I'm a mom, I'm so aware of that never enough, that shame bound identity that we're never enough, we're never doing enough, we're never skinny enough, we're never momming enough, we're never, etc. And I really, that is, I was hesitant to name it that, right? Because I don't want to fuel that part of it. That's
mm.
not, that's why we have to dip our toes into the waters of, you are always and already enough, lovable, worthy. And we're in a constant state of unfolding, right? We're in a constant state of growth and evolution. And if we think we're done, that that's where we stop. That's where we
Really
might
good.
have a veil or a blind spot where we're not quite seeing how our people pleasing is actually causing harm or causing resentment.
Mm,
Or, I always say, like, even the nicest, most people pleasing, martyry person on the planet is going to eventually cause harm because they're going to look for ways that they're, not being appreciated, or they're going to look for ways that they're being hurt, or and then they're going to foster resentment. And then they'll say something nasty like, "Oh, are you resting? How nice for you." Well, some of us don't get to rest, things like that,
I'm gonna tell you,
And
I've never
so,
said that.
me neither, me neither. No, I mean, we all have crap, right? We all have stuff. And I think it's
Yeah.
just, are we in a place, can we be self-reflective without being self-shaming, self-judging, or self-critical? And it's just an opportunity to continue that process. And I talk about this in the book, like on the book is a kaleidoscope, which is sort of my favorite symbol or metaphor of our personal growth, right? So we're in this iteration of our kaleidoscope, and it's exactly where it needs to be. It's in this pattern that it's in. And then we turn, and certain patterns compost, or certain relationships no longer serve us, certain people pleasing, or not having enough boundaries, those start to compost, and then we come in this new iteration of ourselves.
Mm,
And
yeah.
it's holding at both end of always enough, and we're always changing and growing.
I mean, I
So
love how you look at that and how you explain it. And I am going to tell you, I hope that some of the moms listening have maybe changed their perspective a little bit from what you've said, because what I'm hearing, I feel like I am constantly trying to give mothers help identifying the proof that they're enough. So,
totally.
so I'm curious from you what you would say to the mom listening who still doesn't believe that they're enough.
Yeah. I would say that likely has a root in unhealed wounding.
Mm,
And that you so when we believe, pick your flavor, right? Pick your flavor of shame bound belief. Not enough, I'm bad, piece of shit, i'm
yes.
i'm
Yep.
i'm unlovable, I'm unworthy. We all pick your flavor, right? But
Yes.
when we have that, we likely developed those belief systems due to an unmet need, whether it's an unmet need of an attuned caregiver. Most of us, even if we don't have big T abuse, a lot of us have the missing experience of having a regulated nervous system that could just hold space when we were feeling some kind of way, and at the same time hold us accountable and hold some healthy boundaries for us without that being punitive or critical or, whatever. That's a missing experience for my kids sometimes. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I know the
And
importance of that.
and you're teaching it. Yeah. No, I relate to that.
Right? Because like when we're activated, I can't show up regulated. I joke that I'm sure my kids are gonna, you know, grow up. I mean, they're older, they're 14 and 11, but they probably roll their eyes like that their mother wrote a book about nervous system regulation because they're like, this is, that's cute, mom. That's cute that you're writing the book
And
on nervous
and I
system.
and I want to stop you for 2 seconds and tell you that my 12-year-old will say to me, and you're a therapist, and that's
Yes,
how you talk to me.
same, same, same,
So we're not
same. Because
perfect. We're
we're
not
human.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're human. And I always say, trauma. Sorry, am I allowed to cuss on your podcast,
Yes,
Rebecca?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Trauma doesn't give a shit what we know. And
Yeah.
so our vagus nerve, my vagus nerve, it connects the brainstem to the gut. It doesn't connect to the frontal lobes. So we can know all kinds of things. You can know that the cause of your negative belief is your, a misattuned caregiver, or you can know that it wasn't really your fault. You can know that whatever, but it doesn't matter what we know. We can know that our kids need us to stay calm and attuned. And when we're activated, it does, all of that goes right out the window. You can read all the parenting books, which I have, and
Yep.
all of that shit goes right out the window when I'm activated,
It's
right? When
true.
my nervous system is organized around self-protection, or if they're throwing a tantrum about us not having blueberry cream cheese in the fridge, and I go to like, I'm raising these entitled white boys, ah! Like, and I lose it.
Yep.
uh, right? And so all of that regulation goes out the window, which is why we have to bring in the body. I have much larger capacity if I am consistently taking care of my nervous system, whether that be, just yoga or meditation or some sort of somatic practice that actually helps tone the nervous system. So I want to come back to that original, like, how would I tell the moms that they're not enough, or that, what's the evidence? One is actually to recognize that those negative beliefs help to survive, because when we are little kids, we don't have the capacity to understand that our parents might be unhealed. And so believing that it is about us, if I'm bad, if I'm not enough, I can do something to change it. I'll become a therapist. I'll be really good at tracking and attuning to people what they need, and I'll give it to them. I'll learn how to like say yes to everything, right? If it's about us, it gives us a little bit of power. And it also allows us to maintain connection, because if it's about us, especially when we're young, we can maintain the fantasy that our caregivers and that the world is safe and unconditionally loving and predictable, because we need that. We need to be able to attach in order to survive. And so those negative beliefs become stuck in the survival part of the brain, rather than, you know they're not just choices, they're stuck in the survival part. So it feels like if we stop people pleasing, or if we, believe that we're worthy, that can bring up a lot of fear, because that's been our fuel source for power and connection and belonging. So those negative beliefs actually had adaptive qualities, and now they're no longer serving you. It feels like that's the thing that's going to keep you going, that's going to keep you saying yes to that PTA bake sale, that's going to keep you saying yes to relationships that no longer work. um it and that it's adaptive, but it's no longer serving you.
That was an excellent explanation. And I think that there's probably a lot of people who feel like me. And I feel like I've done a lot of work on that to make myself feel like enough. And now I see in my daughters that I now want to work on them feeling like enough. So,
Totally. Yeah. And we're all swimming in the soup here. We're swimming in a we're swimming in a society that
yeah.
tells us that benefits
Uh,
from us not believing that we're enough. Right? We can sell we get to sell those wrinkle creams and sell those weight loss bullshit, all that. Like it like we are swimming in the soup of being told that we're not enough.
so true. My friend just told me I needed to tint my eyebrows, and I'm like, my eyebrows are fine.
Are fine. Good for you. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I mean, we're not robots. And the other thing that I speak to a little bit in the book is I also a little bit of this is self-reflection, right? I don't want to be friends with somebody that doesn't have any self-reflection. We want to be mindful that it's probably overdeveloped for most of your listeners, right? It's probably overdeveloped into shame and criticism and judgment, but let's not lose the ability to self-reflect. Um, and to do that in a way that's a growth mindset rather than a shame-bound mindset, right? That gets us into defensiveness or deflection. But I don't know that I want to be friends with somebody that's like in self-love all the time. Like,
That's
that's the
true.
goal. But I want somebody that's gone through the dark night of the soul and has some parts of them that are, self-reflective or that hold a little bit of vulnerability, right? Because
Yeah,
that's where our empathy comes in. That's where our vulnerability comes in, right?
I like that. That's an excellent way to look at it. And I will tell you, in a society who is unfortunately might be contributing to my daughters, on social media, looking at things, working on themselves, trying to feel like enough. What can we do as moms to support them to feel better about themselves?
Well, I think just naming it, right?
Mm,
Naming that I want you to develop, honey, the critical eye, the critical, the critical thinking, but also the critical feeling. Who benefits from what I'm watching, right? Is this, or what am I actually consuming here? And there's a narrative that especially young women are taught that their worth is in whether or not men find them attractive. My partner is a woman and I still
mm,
have some of that baked in, right?
mm.
Like that it gets us in the door of power and all of that. So like teaching our girls especially, but also our young boys, this narrative of where, what are we being indoctrinated in? What are we being programmed to believe about where our worth is, what we have to contribute, what we, my son came home in kindergarten. This is a boy that's being raised by two moms. My sister-in-law is a chemist. And he comes home from kindergarten. He goes, yeah, but girls aren't good at science. And I'm like, excuse me?
Oh
What?
boy.
What are you? So, I mean, kindergarten, right? They're
Oh
picking
my
up
gosh.
these messages and these just subtle ways
You
that
tell him
we
that my daughter has 100 in chemistry.
I know. I'm like, well, yeah, obviously
I'm
this is
kidding.
different
I'm kidding.
now. This was years
I'm kidding.
ago, but I was mortified. But again, we this is baked in. So
Yeah.
how do we
Yeah.
teach them how to have a critical eye? How do we
Mm,
teach them how to build community? How do we teach them how to be in relationship with people that lift them up, people that want to be with them for who they are in the world, that they have a light to shine in this world that is beyond what they look like or what their body's shape is or whatever. So I think teaching them and you know the best gift that we can give to people or to our children is to deconstruct this shit in our own selves, right? Because
Yes.
oftentimes I'll work with clients that are like, I would never want my daughter to believe this, but I believe this about myself, right? I would never want my niece to believe this, but I believe this about myself. And so it's like, okay, that's a really good self-therapy intervention is if you wouldn't say what you are saying to yourself, or if you wouldn't orient, not even just the words, right? But how you are attuning to yourself, how you are showing up for yourself. If you wouldn't want that for your daughter, for your son, for your child, for your niece, for younger people that you know, and you're showing up in a way where you if somebody showed up in that way for your kid, you'd be like, "Get away from my kid, you're dangerous." Right? Then how would you show up? How would you show up for your kid? Another way that I put it is like, if you were to walk into my office and I were to say the shit that you say to yourself
Yeah, yeah,
and
oh
you
my
would
God.
fire me,
Yep,
that's a good indication,
yep.
like that maybe we need to shift that, and not just how we talk to ourselves, because that's very cognitive, that's a very top down kind of process, but how you actually orient to yourself in terms of attunement, in terms of a felt sense, in terms of an open heart. Like, are you are you an energy that you would want to be around for yourself?
Yes. And I couldn't agree more with everything that you said. And I want to add that our children see through the crap and we can't
100%.
pretend. So we have to do it for real and believe it for real, or they won't believe it or learn it.
Right. And you know what you can do is you can own, like I say this to my son all the time, like, honey, I'm
Yes.
still working on this stuff too. We're all a work in progress. And I'm
Yes.
deconstructing, my oldest son especially was like born with perfectionism just
Mm,
running through his veins. And I can't just sit there and say like, you're enough for who you are. Like, he's like, crap, bullshit. I don't believe you.
yes.
And I'm like,
Yes.
I hear you, babe. I hear you. And you've come into this honestly. Like, I struggle with this too. And what I know to be true is perfectionism is paralysis eventually. It will kill
Mm,
your dreams and it will kill your ability to take risks and to just love yourself. Like, it is shame in disguise. And so, we can just own that, honey, I struggle with this too. We're all swimming in the soup. We're all just doing the best we freaking can out here.
it's
And
true.
like, um, you know, I am I might not have it all figured out, but I know that we are worth the work, right? I know that we are
Yes.
worth at least pointing our feet in the direction of wisdom and in the direction of love and in the direction of healing, even if we don't know exactly what that path is going to look like.
Mm, yeah. Very true. Very true. I will tell you that none of us are perfect, no matter how many parenting books, trainings,
Totally.
etc.
And who
Right?
wants to be around that anyway, right? Like,
I
ugh,
love that you say that. I hate when my husband will say to me, "Well, aren't we perfect now?" I'm like, "Mr. Man, I
yeah,
never feel perfect." So,
totally. It's gross.
so I want to ask you about EMDR therapy because I know
Yeah.
that's one of your specialties and I know that people don't know what that is. So can you teach
Sure.
them?
Yeah, yeah. So I really wish Francine Shapiro is the founder of EMDR therapy, and I think she even expressed regret over what she called it. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a ridiculous acronym. I think it turns a lot of people off because it sounds so, I don't know, woo. And when I got trained in it, I was very skeptical and cynical. I was like,
Mm,
this woo woo crap, like blah blah blah. But we have a lot of now neuroscience. We have a lot of brain scans before EMDR and after EMDR. And there's just a lot of evidence behind it now. And how we think it started with moving your eyes back and forth, but a lot of people just use pulsers that kind of buzz in your hands back and forth, right, left, right, left, right, left. And we think what happens is it mimics REM sleep in, when your eyes move back and forth quickly while you're sleeping, it actually helps the right and the left brain to communicate with each other and digest information. And so we see a lot of, when you have unhealed trauma, that trauma literally gets stored in isolation in the brain, and it gets stored in the lower levels of the brain, and it gets stored overactively in the right side of the brain, the emotional side of the brain. And so after EMDR, and again, we see this on like PET scans before and after. Before EMDR, there's a lot of activity in the amygdala. There's a lot of activity in the flight or fight centers, and there's an overactivity in the right side of the brain. And then after EMDR, there's a lot more communication between the right and the left brain. There's a lot more activation there, and there's a lot more activity in the frontal lobes. There's a lot more integration between the limbic system and the lower levels of the brain, the survival part of the brain, and the frontal lobes, which is really our attuned communication, our
Mm,
ability to hold multiple truths, both and at the same time, the ability to calm the flight or fight response. That's really our most human part of our brain. So, EMDR one, you're going to start with a lot of preparation. A good EMDR therapist, a well-trained EMDR therapist is going to give you some tools for regulating your nervous system. We're not just going to jump straight into trauma reprocessing, right? EMDR is an approach to therapy. So I always say to people like, I'm doing EMDR therapy with you right now. It's not just the reprocessing phases. It's really about, being mindful of history taking, being mindful. I really fold in a lot of parts work, like what are the parts of you that hold the trauma? What are the parts of you that hold the protection, the management, and then also the numbing, how do you numb or distract or like, addictions, things like that, right? So what are the parts of you that might not want to look at this? And we need to get consent from all of those parts. And so then, we'll give you lots of preparation. We want you to have some resources to be able to step into the pain without re-traumatizing you, and to be able to step out of the pain at the end of session so that you feel more contained and, kind of zipped up emotionally and grounded, so that you're not leaving session open and raw at the end. And then when you're reprocessing, we kind of get a list of memories depending on, sometimes we go with a list, but sometimes we go with just really what is happening, what's the root of it right now. And then you ask a series of questions that are meant to light up how the memory is currently stored in the brain. I always like to make the distinction. We're not reliving the trauma. We're actually activating how it is currently stored in the brain, which often feels like it's happening in the present moment because trauma doesn't put together chronological time. It feels like it's happening right now. It feels like it's very close, and it feels like it's happening in real time. So it's, what's the worst part of the memory? What's the negative belief that you have about yourself as a result of that memory? What do you want to believe about yourself instead? What emotions come up? Where do you feel it in your body? And how disturbing is it? And then you just kind of go, right. It
wow.
activates, right? It's a
Wow.
big activation.
Yeah.
And then you hold the pulsars or you move your eyes right and left. Sometimes if I'm doing telehealth, I'll just have people tap right, left on their shoulders or on their legs. Um, and it just moves. I mean, it's wild, but it
So
really,
cool.
really works.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard so much about it, and I just think that people would love to know, how do they know that they need it?
I mean, I would say most of us are walking around with some,
I would say that too.
right?
Yeah.
And so EMDR is very
Yeah.
good if you have big T trauma, right? Like abuse, or if you've been in the military, or, big T trauma, EMDR is great for. And if it's more little T trauma, like attachment work, it's just sort of the water you were swimming in, your dad was very not present, mom was misattuned, whatever, right? Or just just sort of that seemingly innocuous strips of childhood, messy divorce, or
Mm,
whatever. Um, EMDR can still be really great for that. You're probably going to want to find a therapist that's also trained in some parts work, some attachment work, some body-based work, because that's just that attachment wounding is much more nebulous, right? When we have a big T trauma, it's this tangible event. We can point to it. We can be like, this thing happened. But for many of us, it was just death by a thousand paper cuts, right? It was the water we were swimming in. It
mm,
was just a general sense of misattunement, or a lack of emotional safety, or a lack of talking about anything, or, just a general whatever, volatility, or whatever. And so you're going to want to do more attachment work as you're doing some EMDR. So how
you're
if
amazing.
if you have not looked at your past and you know that there's some yucky things in there, you would probably benefit from something. I don't think anybody that tells you this is the
And
one thing that's going to help everybody run in the other direction, right? Because we're all
yeah,
messy.
yeah.
Humans are messy, and what works for one person isn't going to work for another. And I've gone to EMDR therapists that are not for me. Their approach
Yeah,
to it is not the right one for me, right? I went to one person and I started crying, and she was like, "You're really out of your window of tolerance here." And I'm like, "Crying? You're out of your window of tolerance." Like, that's not me, right?
it's really
Um,
interesting because what I have found is that someone will jive with one person and not with another person. So you just got to try on therapists,
yeah,
right?
totally.
You got
And
to
you have
try them on.
mechanism. Yeah. And here's the thing, most therapists come to this work unhealed, right?
Mm,
We come to this work because of our own shit. And so you want to get a therapist that you get a felt sense that they have done some work on themselves.
yes,
I
yes.
I remember having therapists as a child that were that old school Freudian, very powered down, they weren't human, they were sort of very judgmental, just yuck, right? Like
Yeah,
that was not for me. I needed somebody that was was had equity at the front, that it made you feel like you knew your own system, you knew your own body, that they weren't looking down on you or judging you, or but they were still going to hold you accountable, right? They were still going to, like, not tell you that you were great and you didn't have any work to do. We don't want that either,
we don't
right?
want that either. And I told you before we started, I have to ask you about ketamine
Yeah,
assisted
yeah,
psychotherapy.
yeah.
What is ketamine?
Okay, so there's a lot of feelings about ketamine assisted psychotherapy these days. And we should be careful, and lots of psychedelics are coming on the scene now, right? Psilocybin and even MDMA therapy, and we do want some guardrails. We do want to
Mm,
just not throw medicine in a system and think that that's going to be the cure all. However, when we use something like ketamine, which is really the only legal, uh, and it's not really considered a classic psychedelic, but it can take on some psychedelic properties. It's
mm,
considered to be a dissociative anesthetic. But what happens neurobiologically is that those neurological connections that are so fused together, like maybe you've heard the phrase neurons that fire together wire together, right? The more that you are in this pattern, so whether that's practicing basketballs, which is that's a positive neurological connection if you're getting the basket in the or the ball in the basket. But if you're just overall, like, you know self-critical, let's say that's your pattern and you've practiced that over and over and over again, and those neurological connections are so fused together, something like ketamine actually allows those neurological connections to soften. It literally
mm,
pauses that default mode network, and it allows you to put a little space in between those neurons, and it creates a lot of what we call neuroplasticity, the ability for our brains to create new neurological connections. And so when you're doing it, especially in the context of a therapist that you've done some work with, that you maybe have done
Mm,
some EMDR with, and then as you're altered, as you're on your medicine journey, you're either reprocessing, or as you come out of the medicine journey, you're reprocessing, and you're really doing a lot of intentional work. Man, it really can change the neurological connections, even in a deeper way than something like EMDR. EMDR is already a deep level of work, but when you add medicine to it, it really can just help those neurological connections really have the opportunity to shift. And
really
just from my own,
interesting.
yeah, from my own personal experience, and I see this, it was so powerful for me as a client that I went and got trained in it. And I'll just share, like, with my personal journey. So I'm adopted, and my relationship with alcohol was never to this point of passing out or like not going to work or whatever, but it was just this thing. It was like the mommy happy hour, and it was this thing that I did a lot, right? And it really felt connected to my attachment wounding. My mom, who was my person, she was a drinker. She was also an adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And so I look at my whole life now and I'm like, oh man, it makes so much sense, right? But um, alcohol just felt like it had just too much of a hold on me. And I had done a lot of freaking therapy, a lot of EMDR, a lot of parts work. And ketamine work just allowed that to to soften. And I've been sober from out. I mean, it sounds sort of ironic. I'm going to go do
Wow.
drugs in a therapist's office to get sober, but I've been sober. It'll be 5 years in September from alcohol, and it just doesn't even
Wow.
feel like a thing for me, because
That's
the root of it,
wonderful.
I was able to really get to my baby self and like reclaim her for my own, even though I had done that in so on some level, it was like I couldn't quite get to her. And medicine work really allowed me to do that. And so,
Well,
everybody's
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I feel just really, it's like a liberation, and it doesn't even feel
That's
like a choice that I
amazing.
have to, just like, I don't want, it's just like it doesn't, and it's like I don't hate myself. That's nice. I don't hate myself as much. Um,
That's a good bonus. We don't want
yeah.
you to hate
Yeah, I
yourself.
did. I cognitively knew that I was not a bad person. There was just this thing that had its hold, right? That deep shame bound identity. And medicine work really just allowed that to soften. So
Well, that's
it's not
so
it's not a
amazing.
it's not a one and done. You're just gonna like put this medicine in your body and it's gonna be great. You don't want to do that. It's really this is not doing rails of K at a rave and you're going to be therapeutically healed. Like, you need to do some work, right? You need to do some intention. You need to do some shadow work. Um, because there's a way that you can use this medicine that is obviously not therapeutic, and is more of an addiction, right? Rather than a therapeutic tool.
Well, thank you
So,
for explaining that. When I was reading about you, I was like, I am fascinated and need to know more. And I can't let you go because, I know that there are mothers out there and dads who, want to be supportive. Let's talk about your LGBTQ expertise because I
yeah.
think that's very valuable. And I can't let you go without some help here. So, whether your child is part of the community, not part of the community, how can we help our children? How can we be supportive? Help us be
Yeah.
better parents.
Well, I think just having conversations, right, about
Yes.
the fact that LGBTQ people exist. Like, we exist.
Yeah, that helps.
We exist in the world. And, like, I think, again, just talking about it, like, when I grew up, we didn't really talk about it. So,
Mm-mm.
what questions do you have? Like, what has been my son goes to school, he's in middle school, my younger son, and, gay is still thrown around as an insult all the time.
Mm.
And so, you know, he just has, we've had to talk about like, how do you know he can't be in charge of calling people out every single time that he, you know, it would be all the time, but he chooses when he says like, please, that's just lame stuff. Like, can we stop? It's 2025. Can we please just stop using that as an insult?
I
And
agree.
uh you know, it's a really tender time right now. It's a tender time for LGBTQ community, especially trans and genderqueer folks. There's a lot of collective trauma right now. And
Mm.
people are scared of something that they don't understand. And
Yeah,
a lot of people just haven't had the opportunity to know somebody who's trans or genderqueer, or maybe they do know somebody that's trans and genderqueer and they just don't know it. You know, like there's a lot of people who have transitioned that you would never know. So you just
yeah,
like, you know, we exist in the world. And if you know that we exist in the world and you believe that people have the right to exist in the world and feel safe in the world, that is just as simple as a conversation as you can have, right? And so I think reading book, if you have very young children, you know, Todd Parr has some books of like some families have two moms and some families have two dads. And, you know, some people feel like they don't match the gender that their body would have them, you know, assigned to or whatever. Some people feel like they're part girl and part boy. You know, even scientifically, people can be born with ambiguous genitalia. 1 out of 1,000 babies are actually born some form of ambiguous genitalia or intersex. So even this idea that there's only two biological sexes is actually just scientifically wrong. And I think our own internalized stuff around
mm,
sexuality, around LGBTQ stuff, around trans stuff gets in the way of us being able to have these conversations. And maybe you can just own that with them too. Like, listen, honey, I'm stumbling through, I'm still learning, I'm still, you know, like staying cute, humble about it. And just the internet is full of people that you can learn from for free. So
true.
learn
It's true.
learn about another lived experience, learn about people of color, learn about trans folks. Like just start following some intellectual people and start to get to know them. If you live in like a white suburban bubble, just start following some people that you feel aligned to. Start getting, you know, wisdom of trans people, LGBTQ people, people of color in your ethos. Start, you know, desegregating your life a little bit. There's tons of information out there that you can,
Yeah.
and here's what I often invite people to do is when you think about things like race or when you think about things like trans stuff, notice your own bracing, notice your own nervous system.
Mm,
And you know, there's like this frenzy that happens, or like I want to do it right, or it makes me uncomfortable,
yeah.
or you know, there's this trauma that comes up, and so if we can just regulate our system, and
Mm,
really, actually, that always and already unconditionally loved and love. You are unconditional love. You are unconditional um acceptance, and that's from Dr. Amanda Kemp. I got to give her credit for that. She's a racial justice person, so check her out, she's great. But um if we can have that unconditional love and that always and already online, then we can have some reserves to learn and to make mistakes and to not do things perfectly when it comes to talking to our kids about race or trans stuff or LGBTQ stuff, to just say like, you know, I was never taught this, so I don't really know how to do it perfectly, but what I do know is that people are hurting right now, and I want to be part of building a world around equity and building a world around justice and building a world where everybody feels safe. And I'd like to help you do that too. You know?
That's so well said. So well said. I'm going to make my children listen to this episode. I don't make them listen to all of them, but this one they might have to.
Oh, well,
So,
sorry, kids. Sorry, kids.
gosh, I mean, you know that I could go on and on with questions. I'm just curious from your point of view, is there anything that you want to share that I didn't ask you?
Well, I mean, I would love for people to check out the book, right? And the
Yes, yes.
courses, and you're welcome to work with me. I've got nervous system coaching packages and all of that good stuff. I can really help guide you through the process. So there's different levels and different ways of working with me, but the book is certainly the easiest. You can get a signed copy on my website, and of course it's on Amazon as well. But if you go directly to my website, which is AVOS counseling.com, I still send people a signed copy if you order from the website. And other than that, just give grace for yourself and know that we're all just out here doing the best we can. And just the invitation to point your feet in the direction of what feels like the wise kind of hard, right? I try to strike the word right or good.
Mm,
But what feels like wisdom, right? What feels like the wise kind of discomfort and the
mm.
wise kind of
Well, I soaked up all of your wisdom today. You are just so wonderful to talk to and learn from, and I loved every minute.
I so appreciate your curious nature and your energy in general. Like
Oh,
I'm
so
very
sweet.
grateful. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is Rebecca Green, and I want to remind everyone to spend every day laughing, learning, and loving. Thank you for tuning in to the Whiny Palooza podcast. If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. While you are there, leave a review. I love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.